Chrissie, how did you find carnivore?
It's quite a long journey for me. I would say it goes back about 5 years, and it's a combination of two things. I started postgrad study back in 2020, and that was in public health nutrition. And this is also combined with my own personal health journey. So it's coming to realise that I wasn't the sort of person who sat well with carbohydrates metabolically. And when I did my research, my public health research and postgrad study, I became more familiar with the research into low carb nutrition. There's not a lot on carnivore, but it's emerging. And realizing, how bad the current research is that's underpinning the nutritional guidelines that we're all following. I would say, that the scope of research in the current guidelines is much broader. It's more extensive, but it's very, very weak and it's very, very flawed. But if you go into the low carb space, mostly the ketogenic space, there's a lot of research that is showing some enormous health benefits there. And over the last 5 years, I've been completely convinced that, that humans should not be consuming too much carbohydrate. I'm not saying there isn't a place for it in the human diet. And there are some people who are just not metabolically adapted at all to carbohydrates diet. I feel that I'm one of those people. And, I've gone I'm in my early 50s now. And I feel that since turning 40, my metabolic health completely went downhill. It started off with a tumour on my ovary that I had 10 years ago. Learning that, the ultra processed foods could well have been behind what's happening to my health. So I cut those out. And then over time, I learned about how carbohydrates can negatively impact health, and slowly but surely remove them, starting with about 5 years ago, where something really quite remarkable happened. Since I got the tumour in my early 40s, I've been tested every year. I've had my scans to make sure things were. So I had a nephrectomy on one ovary and then full hysterectomy and leaving one ovary in place, and this ovary was, it was getting cysts regularly on it, getting nasty things on it. And then we got to about 5 years ago, and I got a scan, and I got called up by my doctor to say, hey, there's something quite nasty. There's a nasty growth on that. We don't know what it is yet, but it looks like you're going to have to go in for surgery. And then COVID happened, and they dropped the ball on that one. So we were into the lockdowns, so the hospitals were getting clogged up with people who were getting priority because of COVID. So they dropped the ball on me. Now, in that time, I discovered an organisation called Precure who specialise in low-carb diets. And I did their health coaching course. And I decided to try keto for the first time. And so this was during the first lockdown, and then we came out of lockdown, and the doctor got in touch with me saying, "Oh, hey, we need to go ahead with the surgery." So they booked me in for another scan, and the growth, whatever it had gone. So that was the first amazing thing that happened to me as part of the ketogenic diet. So that had convinced me that the ultra-processed food was definitely out. I was going to cut back on the carbs. So by that stage, I also got IBS as well. Another thing that was wrong with me. The grains went out of the diet. The seed oils went out of the diet. Pulses went out of the diet. So I'm on fruit, I'm on veggies, I'm on meat. And that was doing, I was doing pretty well on that. And then you get into the late 40s and other things start to happen. So I started putting a massive amount of weight on. And I'm somebody, I exercise anything up to 8 hours a week, and the weight wasn't shifting. And I could see the relationship there. I still got some carbohydrate in my diet. And, because of the massive weight gain I was experiencing, I was getting, BMI of like 35 this time last year. And I went to my doctor and I spoke about it, and, she said that my diet was exemplary, and that I shouldn't worry about a BMI of 35 because I was in the lowest 50% of people in my age group in New Zealand. And you're just like, what? Really? I'm like, well, that's not good. I'm certainly not going to accept that. That doesn't mean that I'm okay. It means that, like, most people in New Zealand are not okay. So I thought, right, I've got to do something about this. And I had a few friends who tried the carnivore diet, and I looked into some where there wasn't much research. There was plenty of research on the ketogenic diet. And I thought, right, well, I'm going to try this. It's a bit of a self-experiment and, see what happens. And so I started off, like, I didn't find the transition too hard because I was already taking a lot of rubbish out of my diet. So I started it off, and, the weight loss was just absolutely phenomenal. Dropping now down to 23 kilos since I started 10 months ago. Now that outperforms Ozempic. Massively outperforms Ozempic. And then I thought, well, 9 months in, I got all my blood markers done, and it was exactly what I expected to see. All my inflammatory markers had come down. HDL to triglyceride ratio was absolutely perfect. I went for a lipoprotein A test, which was to establish whether, any cholesterol levels I had were putting me at risk of arteriosclerosis. So I had that test done, and that came well within, like, low risk parameters. The lower figure was 25, the higher figure was 50. So we're talking about, a massively good performing lipoprotein A score there. My LDL cholesterol was up. So of course I got the summons to the doctor, and I thought, great, I'm looking forward to this appointment. So a couple of emails to the doctor saying I'm not worried about this LDL level at all because, with my background in public health research, I know that LDL is not something to worry about in this context. We know that it's not the LDL that's a problem, it's the oxidized or glycated LDL that is an issue with people. So every other marker that I've got is telling me that my LDL is nothing to worry about. If anything, it's of a benefit in my system. So I went to the doctor, and the doctor had to accept that, no, you don't have to go on any statins, which I wouldn't anyway. Nothing to worry about, perfectly healthy. And of course, the other thing is that, at that time I was putting anything up to, 200 grams of excess body fat into my system. Well, of course, that's going to increase my cholesterol. It'll be interesting to see what happens once the weight stabilizes. I'm nearly there. I'm not quite at the weight level that I want to be. We've got maybe 2 or 3 kilos to go, which I'm confident will come off in the next couple of months. Also, the other thing is that I haven't lost any muscle mass with this diet. So whenever I've tried to lose weight before, the muscle mass is compromised. I've had the body scans done, which have shown that, sometimes I could lose like 3 kilos and like 2/3 of that is muscle. And you're like, well, what was the point of doing that? But this time round, my muscle integrity has stayed intact. And it literally has just been body fat that's come off, which is awesome. So now, I've just got into the healthy BMI range, healthy body fat percentages. So my doctor had to accept, well, yeah, okay, fair enough. If you are, if you're melting away 100 to 200 grams of body fat a day, well, of course, that's going to put your cholesterol up. So yeah, we'll watch this space with that one, but it's certainly not something that I'm worried about at all.
So your doctor actually, like, you could reason with your doctor?
Yes, yeah.
Wow.
Well,
That's a unique doctor.
I don't want to brag, but in terms of nutrition, I'm a bit more qualified than my doctors. With good an MPhil in public health nutrition. So there's some interesting stories, around that journey where my MPhil supervisor, now my PhD supervisor, I said, well, actually, you do realise you know more than your doctor about lipids now, and you know more about nutrition and mental health and health in general. And the doctors aren't trained nutritionists. They are trained in the medical model. They are trained to prescribe pills. They are not trained to prescribe lifestyle medicine, which I am. And, I can go to my doctor and say, well, actually, this, XYZ, no, I'm not at risk. In fact, what was really funny was that I asked my doctor for an APOP test, and she didn't know what one was.
So sorry, an APOP test.
Yeah, APOP test. Yeah.
Oh wow.
Yeah, didn't know. So what's that? Hopefully, she's gone to look that up. I mean, it's. You can be a little bit cynical about it, but I think, if you're going into your doctor and saying, hey, this is what I think, and then, the doctor will go away then and we'll look at that and we'll consider what you've told them. And then hopefully that, just repositions the doctor a little bit in terms of, treating people with metabolic health conditions.
Yeah. Wow. So you've had this like 23 kilos in 10 months, this massive
Yeah.
weight loss. Have there been other things that have improved, like, for example, your sleep or energy?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, sleep like a baby now. I mean, I can go 72 hours without eating if I want to. And I don't have any energy compromises. And I'm an endurance cyclist, and I thought with the fat adaptation, I thought I was going to test it. I've never done this before. If you go out for a ride, you take some food with you because you think, oh, you're going to need it for energy. And a couple of months back, I thought, right, I'm going to give this a go. I'm going to actually see how long I can ride without eating for the previous 24 hours, just on water. I went, there was about 800 meters of climb on the ride I did, and I went solid for 3 hours.
That's
Yeah.
interesting. And so, as far as afterwards with recovery and how tired you felt and things like that, was it kind of, would you say you felt better than you had before?
Absolutely fine. I could have carried on, but what I normally do if I go out on my bike, then my partner follows me in the car afterwards. So I said, oh, give me catch me up in 3 hours. And normally I'm at a certain point. And the other thing was that I was about 20 minutes up on my usual time for that ride. So I'm kind of getting close to the end point. We normally meet in a lovely little place called the Bayview Hotel, which is in a place called Kiowa, which is on the Thames Peninsula in New Zealand. And I got to the end of the ride and he's saying, "Christ, I wondered where you were. I thought I'd passed you." And I went, "Oh no, I'm here." So I was just a little bit short of getting there. So I was riding faster. And at the end of it, I was absolutely fine, and I was able to go out and do it again the next day. So exercise recovery, it's much better. I don't get the energy slumps either that I used to get. And one of the things that I did notice, and this was something that again informed my decision to do the carnivore diet, was that I found that I could eat a piece of fruit and then suddenly the headache would come on. I'd have to go and sleep. And on one occasion, I ate a banana, and 20 minutes later, I had to go to bed. And I just thought, what is going on with this? And I thought, I'm going to test my blood sugar. So I did, and it skyrocketed. It was about 7.2 millimoles per litre. And not only that, it stayed up. It did not come back down again. And I thought, right, so obviously there's insulin resistance going on here, and that is affecting my energy levels and, leading to these headaches and having to go to bed in the middle of the day. And that's completely resolved now. So I can go full day, go to work, still have plenty of energy, not get any tiredness during the day, and and then normal bedtime, go to sleep, and the other thing is getting up, getting out of bed, and springing into action. The minute you wake up, there's no pressing the snooze button now. In fact, sometimes I'm awake before my alarm. So yeah, definitely improved.
Yeah. I don't remember the last time I ever felt like needing to press the snooze button myself either. Um, so based on the experience you've had and also with your education and the research you've done, um, how do you feel when you see so many advocates out there for wholly plant-based eating?
Oh God. Yeah, I sometimes get a bit vocal, um, and yeah, it's something that's massively concerning for me, because as much as they will say that they're healthy and they'll claim that they've got the healthiest diet on the planet, and then when you point out to them they haven't, then it's like, well, we're doing this, it's a worthy sacrifice. But I think the information that they are putting out is it could be devastating for for public health, and for the agenda to try and encourage people to to eat more plant-based, for environmental reasons and animal rights reasons and health. And it does make me quite concerned that the research that they're using to back this up is so unbelievably flawed, that to try and correct that, and to try and explain to people why this research is bad and the potential damage that they could be doing to their health, it's very, very difficult. And often you meet with a backlash. It doesn't matter how reasonably you try and explain this to people, you get name called, all sorts of derisory comments. I've had all sorts of things like, go enjoy your heart attack. Oh, you're going to get colon cancer like next week. And it's a big battle, but I'm hoping that moving in the space that I'm doing and with my research, then more and more people will come on board, see the sense of what's happening in the research that's happening now. And thankfully, there is more and more research that is now starting to come to the forefront of this space, which is proving the research that underpins the dietary guidelines completely wrong. In fact, there is, when it comes to cardiovascular disease, there is not any clinical evidence anywhere that proves the diet heart hypothesis. This is all based on very, very bad epidemiology that was rigged. And you can point that out to people, and people get quite cross when you do that, but they can't refute what you're saying, because there you are putting the actual study that Ansel Keys did and showing the plots that he published, well, that he didn't publish, and showing that how he manipulated that evidence. And then you go back to Yudkin and say, well, this is the person, why did, say, well, we know now that this is all very flawed, and I can present these people with the research, paper after paper after paper, that shows this is wrong. They can't argue with you. And the only thing they can do is, just name call you. Just say, make some derisory comment like saying, oh, well, you're a shill. I'm like, no, I'm not. Nobody pays me to say anything that I say. I'm doing my research. The only thing I've got is I've got a fees grant from the university, and that's the only bit of money that I'm getting. I'm not getting paid by anybody to say what I say. So when we go into the cancer space, the colorectal cancer space, you're like, well, actually, we've got this. We've got some studies and, some data that comes mainly out of the nurses study that shows that maybe we've got at most an 18% added risk of getting colorectal cancer if we eat red meat, mainly processed meat. But what they haven't calculated is the absolute risk, which is less than 1%. So you flip that research and try and tell them, so this actually means that 99% of cases of colorectal cancer have absolutely nothing to do with meat consumption. So Yeah, you present people with that, they throw their teddy out of the pram. They've got into that mindset. And I'm going to be honest, actually, sometimes, when I saw that cholesterol reading that I had, there was a little bit of an alarm bell went off, because it's been, this is something that's been embedded for my whole life. And I've only been able to reposition myself in the last 5 years. So we're starting to disprove it. And hopefully this will come to the forefront of research, because the other way I look at it as well is, if I get onto a space on social media, where we've got plant-based advocates there, then I can put my voice out there. My voice is the most useful there, I believe. I can say what I want on the carnivore site, and everybody will applaud me, and everybody will be on side with me, and great. But I think it's actually quite important to get onto those spaces where you're finding either advocates of the plant-based diet, or you're finding advocates of the standard American diet as well, and get your voice on there, because a lot of people actually do get converted and do start to look into things more deeply when they hear me and other people saying these things on those sites.
So you mentioned a few things that made me think of something I'd like to get your thoughts on. So I think when it comes to carnivore, when we look at the research that's been done, and there's no actual convincing proof of, like, for example, meat causes colorectal cancer and all this kind of thing. Um, we've got logic and reason on our side. And so if you're talking to someone about diet, we have, like, it's very easy to make a logical argument for carnivore. I
Yeah.
think the issue is you have to get into the nuance of it to make people actually understand what you're talking about, and talk about the nuances of studies and things like food frequency questionnaires, and how broken that whole system is, and things like that, right? And people have got the attention span of a goldfish these days, right? And plant-based advocates have had decades of time to build slogans and to build campaigns and to creep into people's consciousness, right? So we're at quite a disadvantage, I think, because it's hard to argue logic and reason to people who have had 40, 50 years of indoctrination into a particular way of
Mm.
eating.
Yeah. Well, that goes back to the point I made earlier, that, when I had my cholesterol test, I just had this little nagging voice there, and I've had to correct myself. And, it's taken me 5 years to reposition myself. So yes, it is going to be hard, but you've got to look at the other side of it, because how many people actually really want this plant-based agenda? Like, not many. And a little confession there. I was vegetarian stroke vegan aspirant for 20 years. And yeah, and I actually look back now and think that possibly my metabolic health problems started with that. So I come from the other side also, of somebody who spent a lot of time trying to persuade people to become vegetarian. I also had vegans trying to convert me at the time. And, at the time, the vegan argument was making sense to me completely. And I was believing all these people, but I found it really hard to cross the line. And every time I attempted vegan, I failed. And then slowly I was like pulled back after 20 years, and I started eating meat again. And they've got to think about, well, how did I go from being like a really committed vegetarian? I used to go out on, hunt, I used to go out fox hunt sabbing and things like that, and, waving the banners and, yes, I've got all that in my background. How does somebody shift from that back to me? And I think the thing that you've got on your side is that there is something programmed into our DNA that makes us want to eat meat, definitely, because the nutrient profile of meat is so in tune with how we should be eating, that there's something in our DNA that takes us back in that direction. And you look at what is it, 84% of vegans fail. You even look on something like, you go onto like Earthling Ed. I mean, he put a video out a few months ago that was talking about his frustrations at seeing all these people who, he'd been out campaigning with like 10 years earlier who'd now renounced veganism. And he was like, what's going on? So if those kind of people are going back to eating meat, then it's like, I don't think the battle to convert people to carnivore, or certainly the low carb, or to eat more meat, is actually that difficult. And I've got to say, from my own personal experience, I have converted more people to the carnivore diet in the last 10 months than I ever converted to veganism or vegetarian in 20 years. So it was 0 people converted to veganism. And now I'm on 4 converts. I've actually managed to get a hardcore vegan to eat chicken. And it's a funny story. I've just done a home kill, and we got some mince, and she keeps cats, and she's quite happy to feed her cats the species appropriate diet, and she's the sort of person who doesn't want to give her cats cat food, because of the rubbish that's in it. So she said, "Oh, have you got any meat?" So I gave her some mince to feed her cats, and then she confessed to me today that she actually ate it herself.
Wow.
Yeah. So I think that, in the carnivore space, it is actually really quite easy to convert people. And I didn't actively convert anybody. People just looked at me. So I went into work, and, one of my colleagues was like, "My God, you've lost so much weight. How did you do it?" And I just went, "Oh, I'm on the carnivore diet." Didn't say anything about it. Oh, right. And then the next things I could do with like losing a few pounds. It's like, tell me a little bit more about this carnivore diet. So I sat down, and then the next colleague comes along and sit down and have the conversation. And, oh, could you tell my wife a bit more about this as well? So the next thing I'm having the conversation, and people just see what's happening. And, you're a self-advocate because they can see so visibly the benefits that are happening to me. It's like, oh yeah, you're looking really lean, you're looking trim, you're getting more muscle definition. How's that happening? And then, people come up to me, it's like, oh, don't you lose muscle mass? Are you worried about with all this weight loss? I'm like, no, I haven't lost any muscle, I've gained it. And I think the other thing that's really important with this is that I've gained it without trying. I'm a cyclist. I don't do weight training, and yet my muscle mass has increased.
Yeah, that's such a cool thing. I remember a few months in, like looking in the mirror and going, I look like I've been working out a little bit and I've done nothing.
Yeah. It's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
You look leaner. I'm going to say that my leg muscles have always been in good shape with the cycling. My upper body, not so much. But one of the issues I was having with the weight gain with cycling, I did the Lake Topo around the lake, and and I had lost a bit of weight just before then, so I've been on carnivore, but I was about 15 kgs heavier than I am now. And it was taking its toll on my upper body, and one of the problems I had was that I ended up injuring my tricep. And it's literally because the weight of my upper body on the handlebars, climbing the hills, it just could not take the stress. And, hopefully now I won't have that problem because I've, lost more than 20% of my body weight. So that's 20% more stress that I can hold on my upper body. And that's, without really doing any upper body strength work.
Yeah, that's awesome. So what is your eating pattern like day to day?
Well, I've actually done intermittent fasting for years. Definitely more than 5 years. I can't remember the last time I actually ate breakfast. That could be well sort of like over 20 years. I've not been a breakfast eater. So, typically the sort of person who was having my first meal when I got home. But unfortunately, I had this tendency to get home and raid the fridge, which I don't do now because I've got much, much better control. So I'll go to work on in the morning without any breakfast and go right through, come home. And then, I make sure that I get a good portion of meat, so I'll be eating maybe about 300 grams of meat. I still eat dairy, but I've got to be careful with dairy because, dairy's still got carbohydrate in. I'm just going to shift my thing actually because the sun's come out and it's coming through the blinds. Dairy's got carbohydrate and I've got to watch that because if I have too much dairy, that will take me over the carb threshold for keto. So I minimise that to, just a bit of milk. I still have coffee. So it will just be a little bit of milk and coffee throughout the day. And I don't think that, I'm not drinking coffee to get me through the day. I'm drinking coffee because I like drinking coffee, right? That's something I won't give up. So I'll get home and, stick the steak, stick the chops, whatever, or if I'm deciding to eat fish, if I'm, whatever I'm going to eat in the pan. And I might, just have a little bit of cheese. So a hard cheese, which is lower in carbohydrates. So I'll just eat that. I'll eat boiled eggs. And that's pretty much it. So the rest of the time I'm just drinking water and just maybe having another coffee later on, and that really is it.
That's awesome. So that's just like that one meal a day. You go to work, you do
Yeah,
everything, come home and have the meal, and then you're done.
yeah, that's it.
How easy is that, compared to the before times when you're probably like thinking every 2 hours, what am I going to have for my next snack or my next meal?
Yeah, well, I mean, as I said, I have managed to do intermittent fasting for a long time. I think probably the biggest difference is, when they put food out at work, it's pretty terrible. It's just full of pastries and, some fruit and that. And, but before I went carnivore, I was really tempted all the time, to nibble at these things, at these staff buffets that came out. It was hard to keep off the bad stuff, the processed stuff that they put out. And now I don't have to, I don't have to do that at all. I have much, much better control. Before I was doing the ketogenic diet or trying to, and I did find it quite hard to do that because if you go onto a keto diet, then the meat side and the dairy side, that's all fine. But you are still eating vegetables and it becomes really hard when you're still eating plant-based stuff to keep below that, that 20% or 10% threshold, depending on how keto you want to be. So it's really easy to slip out of the eating protocol unless you are measuring your macros all the time and you're sitting there and planning, and not everybody has the ability to pump their put their foods into into an app that calculates your macros, and we haven't all got time to do that. So when you go carnivore, it's just so easy because you just by default you're not eating too much carbohydrate.
Yeah. So you you're eating this way, you've been 10 months, you've lost all this weight, you're feeling better, and people around you, you're leading by example, people around you are showing interest.
Mm.
Um, can you see this as a way of eating forever?
I can now, yeah. I didn't to start with. I had a few concerns, that there were potential nutrient deficiencies. And when you first start the carnivore diet, you're lowering your potassium, you're lowering your, magnesium and manganese. And this is where people get those initial symptoms, the brain fog, the energy slumps. And then sometimes you get the digestive problems as you're transitioning. So in that early stage, it's like, oh yeah, well, I'm just going to try this for 3 months or something like that. But then once you get through that transition and you start to come out the other side, you've got your oxalate dumping going on as well. And I could see at various points. So I think once I got to the 9-month mark, I was like, yeah, this is going to be for life. Now, I'm not going to claim that I haven't at any time, lapsed from this, but more recently I haven't. So in the first 6 months, I can probably count on one hand how many times I had a little bit of a cheat. And I used to just sometimes, in the early stages, I'd eat a few pine nuts because I thought that was a natural way of getting the magnesium and the potassium levels up and the manganese levels up as I was transitioning. But now I've certainly learned that your nutritional needs change on the carnivore diet. You've got to think about the RDIs and how they were formulated on a very carb-heavy diet. So, all these references are based on people who are mostly eating carbohydrates. We haven't got reference values for people who are on a ketogenic diet, and that the absorption of some nutrients from animal-based foods are like 900 times higher than some plant-based foods. You look at iron absorption from meat compared to something like spinach, and it's way up. So if you haven't got these things inhibiting your nutrient absorption, you don't need the same amount. You don't need to be conforming to to standard reference RDIs for nutrient intake. And so I had my potassium levels, my magnesium level tested, and considering I haven't been getting a lot of that, or certainly the amount of those in my diet over the last 9 months have definitely been well below RDIs. My levels are absolutely fine.
Nice. And so are you raising your own animals for meat?
Yes, I do. Yeah.
So like, how is that something you've just recently started, or has that been going on for a while?
There's an incredibly funny story around this, because myself and my partner bought the lifestyle block that we live on about 8 years ago. And, this is before, I was still very, very mainstream in my views on the environment and my views on nutrition at that time, and believe it or not, I was still aspiring to be a vegan back then. So we got this block of land, and it came to the attention of a vegan rescue. So they asked us if we'd take some rescue steers, and we said yes. And we said, oh, promise you won't eat them, and this kind of, okay, fair enough. The first question was, isn't this going to increase my carbon footprint if I put these steers on my land? But magically, these vegan rescue steers, they don't harm the environment. So I looked into that and was like, well, actually, we've got a 3-hectare forestry block, which will absorb every single scrap. So I was reassured on that front. Okay. And I'm looking around at all the other cows. So that must mean that none of the rest of the cows in this farming community I live in are actually contributing to climate change either. So that was reassured on that front. So then the next thing was, we're raising these steers up, and one of them went completely rogue. And it was breaking fences. It was getting into the next door's herds and making a nuisance of itself. It was getting to the point where I was like really actually quite scared to go out on my land in case I encountered it. It was quite a volatile creature. On one occasion, it had me pinned up against a fence. It charged me. I had to get out of the way. The neighbours were worried about it, because they were quite worried about this thing. So this is a steer, but it was behaving like a bull. So we got back to the vegan rescue people and said, look, we're going to have to get rid of this. We can't keep this. It's dangerous. And, they didn't show any interest at all in helping us. There was no support from them mending all the fences that had broken. And it was like, well, look, he's going to have to go. And it's like, look, if we don't shoot it, somebody else will. So it's like, well, then you've got the problem now that you can't just get rid of an animal carcass. Um, you know, there are certain environmental regulations. So what's the best thing to do with it? Eat it. So we did. Yeah, and then the next thing was, the other steers were getting older. You've got to say, well, look, we're going to start getting into the problems now that we've got. They weren't, that old, but, once they get past a certain age, their teeth wear down, and, that can cause problems for feeding them. They could get infections. They could become lame. One of them, got lame, and it's like, well, we're going to make a decision here. What do we do? So they're now in the freezer. And benefiting ourselves, benefiting other people. And I know that this is, these animals have not had a single antibiotic. The only thing we've ever done is drench them for parasites, which you've got to do that. They may have had their vaccines when they, when they're quite young, but we know that these are organic, grass-fed cows, the best nutrition in them. You're not going to get anything better in them. Because of that, they taste better. So, from a health point of view, they've got to be the healthiest thing on the planet to eat. So, we've got some more now, and we'll raise them up. And, in about 18 months, we'll use them for meat as well.
Nice. So if you had another friend come to you and say, okay, I want to give carnivore a try, what do I do? Based on your experience, what tips or advice would you give them?
I would say, first thing I would say, what are you eating at the moment? Because if you're going to be successful on the carnivore diet, you've got to transition properly. And I think, with any dietary change, you're going to get some pretty horrible, nasty symptoms in the in the first couple of weeks. Usually you get by okay for the first 2 weeks, and then the third week. So in fact, I've had somebody ask me about it recently, and she's in a situation where she's just got a new job. And it's like, no, don't start carnivore when you're starting a new job. Get into your new routine. Get things fixed up with yourself first, and your working life and stuff. Get that all organised, and then come back. And we'll talk about how you're going to do this properly. Because what are you eating at the moment? Because if you're eating a lot of ultra processed food, you're gonna go through a really rough time. So I'd be saying to people to start with, well, look, don't go carnivore straight away. Just eliminate some of the bad foods. So just take yourself off ultra processed food. And for some people that might actually like be enough, because it's carnivore diet isn't necessary for everybody. Carnivore diet for me is great, but it might not be right for everybody. So let's find your metabolic sweet spot. But let's take the nasties out first, and let's see how you get on, and let's see how you feel. Let's see if you lose weight. Let's see if your biomarkers improve on that. And then, once you feel comfortable and you've taken that out, then, start to take other things out. So it may be that you take the ultra-processed food out first and then go on a cycle. Do that for 3 months. See how you get on. And once you feel okay, ready to take the next step, then let's take something else out. I mean, I would probably say that the next thing to take out would be grains, because they're in my hierarchy of nastiness. Nasty foods, I would say that grains are the next thing that are going to mess you up metabolically. Sugar first, seed oils next, then grains. And then, try that for a few weeks. And then when you feel okay, go to the next step. And the next thing down on the hierarchy would be fruit and veg, because of the oxalates, and fruit because of the potential to, for the insulin spikes, which could be, having adverse effects on your energy levels and your sleep. So let's get them out. And then, where are you going to sit with carnivore? Are you going to take dairy out as well? Are you going to still eat eggs? Are you going to be a line carnivore? And, and where do you want to sit with it? What's going to fit well with your lifestyle? Because, I'm not going to be judgmental. I know there are people out there who's like, oh, the pure carnivores, the line carnivores, they're the only people doing it properly. But no. It's just you do you with carnivore. You decide where you're going to sit with it. If people are still having metabolic issues with a dairy egg poultry, meat based, I think the next thing they say, well, cut down with dairy. I mean, that's where I sit because I got quite a lot of weight loss stalls on my journey, and I figured out that actually I had too much dairy, so I cut back on dairy, and then everything started to go again, and it started to work. The weight started to come down again. So that's what I sit with it. So I think everybody's got to do the carnivore the way they do it, and I do know that some people have a bit of honey, some people maybe still eat some nuts, and that's up to them. But I would definitely say to anybody is that there are certain things you definitely should not be eating. You should not be eating any refined sugar at all. You should absolutely, definitely not be eating any seed oil. And grains, if you've got any issues with your digestion, that's another thing that's got to come out of your diet. And then let's see where we go after that.
Yeah. Nice. So, Chrissy, if people want to reach out to you, do you have any social media or any way of getting in contact?
Yeah, I've got email, and I've got my Facebook page, and so I have quite a private Facebook page because unfortunately, when you're getting out into spaces where you might be a bit vocal on vegan sites, my Facebook page has been attacked before, so I do keep it quite private. But I'm happy to take personal messages. Just Chrissie M Wardle. That's my Facebook page, and people
No,
can message me. I'm accessible. Yeah.
yeah, no worries. I'll link to your email and the Facebook in the show notes. Chrissy, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story. I really appreciate your time.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. Yeah.